Huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Ruben Olson.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues, Campfire Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going to be diving into the newspaper UFO sightings. So this is something I've kind of been doing lately, focusing on a specific cryptid or occurrence, either Dogman, Mothman, or Bigfoot. And you can check out those episodes as well. They're on our feed. Basically, I go through different newspaper reports and clippings that I've kind of sourced out that focus on each particular thing. But before we get into that, a couple of plugs. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca. That is our main website with our blog access. You can also find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And then we're also on Patreon, where you can get ad-free, exclusive, early episodes available there. Additionally, if you want to send us an email and say hi, we're available at CryptidClues@gmail.com. And yeah, that should do it. So without further ado, let's get into this. So I was kind of looking through my usual routine of old newspaper clippings and just different articles associated with some stuff. And I thought, well, this is a prime topic to dive at because it's UFOs. And this is something that stems ages and decades back since we started publishing newspapers. There's just, I mean, even before newspapers, heck, this is something that's been shown on tapestries. Like, it just goes back eons and eons. So I thought this is just a good honed in opportunity to focus on the newspaper aspect and what people were talking about a few decades ago in relation to flying saucers and unidentified aerial craft. So I'm going to read off a few that I found here, starting with, and I quote, 4C flying saucer. Dalwallanu, Friday. 4 Dalwallanu residents say they saw what appeared to be a flying saucer in the western and southwestern sky. Richard Hunter and Keith McNamara, who were fox hunting north of Dalwallanu, said that the object appeared to be a large star surrounded by a white vaporous ring. It traveled west for about half an hour, dimming and brightening alternatively, then disappeared over the horizon. Messrs. L. Angel and K.P. Jeffries said that they also saw the object. Government astronomer H.S. Spiegel said that today, from the report, it would appear the object was traveling too fast to be an astronomical body such as a meteorite. The Perth Weather Bureau said it certainly wasn't a meteorological balloon. RRAF Pierce and Air Traffic Control Guildford said that they had no aircraft in the area at that time. End quote. So there's our first one for today, and it's just kind of talking and getting us into the mindset of people seeing it, reporting it, and just the reaffirmation that, hey, we didn't have any aircraft here, we didn't have any weather balloons, you know, we're not all connected in this. This is something that was out of our control that just manifested, I guess, or appeared there, and you saw it. So what do we got here? We got another one. This one's interesting, and quotations, very reliable witness. Some of the headlines of these old newspaper sightings, you really got to weave through them to kind of hone out which ones are maybe a little bit more on the serious side than other ones, because it's no different from how marketing is done today when a headline is used to capture people's attention. And I'm even gullible for that too when an article has a really good headline. And they have the big bold font on these old newspapers. Policeman sees UFO. This is from April 1964. Sirocco. It's a good place for a flying saucer. Right on the edge of White Sands Missile Range on the wide-open New Mexico desert, just 30 miles northwest of the site of the world's first atomic blast. Sirocco policeman Lonnie Zamora says he saw it, and police and military men seem inclined to believe him. Zamora is a very reliable witness. Army Captain Richard T. Yolder, uprange commander of White Sands Stallion Range, said Holder, whose headquarters is near the central New Mexico town, was called in by local police after Zamora reported seeing the object Friday. Deputy Sheriff James Luckle, that L looks almost like an I and vice versa, said he believes it's something out of the ordinary, something very few have ever seen. I was scared, Zamora said. He said his experience taught him one thing. If it happens again, he will still run away like he did Friday, but he will not tell a soul about what he saw. Zamora said he spotted an egg-shaped object on the desert, about a mile south of Sirocco. He denied seeing any signs of life around the object and said the machine rose and flew slowly away until it faded from sight. He said he spotted what appeared to be a pair of white coveralls near the saucer, but could not tell if anything or anyone was in them. The object, about the height of a car but larger, appeared to be made of a shiny aluminum-like substance, Zamora said. It flew away after he got within about 100 yards. The two investigating officers were at the scene Sunday from Cuillin Air Force Base in Albuquerque. Major William Connor and Sergeant David Moody used a Geiger counter to check the area, where the only evidence of an unusual visitor was a burned bush and 4 small depressions in the ground. Zamora said the machine had been supported on the ground by 4 girder-like legs, and the bush was supposedly burned by the exhaust from the saucer. Holder said he checked with both White Sands and nearby Holloman Air Force Base. Neither base, he said, is using any object comparable to Zamora's machine. Government agencies will continue the investigation, Holder said. And government agencies, yes, they most certainly will be continuing the investigation. I don't doubt that. What we got here? Virginia UFO sightings top 1,000. What do we got here? This, I believe, is in October. Huge UFOs equipped with strobes continue to fly over Wythe County, Virginia, where more than 1,000 sightings have been reported since the first week in October. According to Broadcast News Director Danny Gordon of WYVE Radio in Witherville, although both the Pentagon and the Defense Department have repeatedly denied any knowledge or involvement in the raft, I believe that is. Some of these old newspaper words are a little tricky to read. Of UFOs, Gordon, with 2 other researchers, suspects a military explanation may be forthcoming. We think it may be a military craft of a highly experimental nature, Gordon speculates, or something they don't want to talk about that's not theirs. Wythe County is a testing area for daytime flights by the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Senator Paul Trebel, Virginia, is officially contacting the military regarding the UFOs. According to his Washington, D.C. press secretary, John Miller, subsequent action will depend on the military's response, Miller says. Reports have depicted V-shaped craft, round and dome-topped objects, and fast-moving colored lights. Witnesses have described seeing the craft manage 90-degree turns and speeds faster than known aircraft, along with incidents of the UFOs dodging automobiles. One witness claims he saw something on November 2nd which resembled a ship from Star Wars. Daytime military activity proves inconclusive as a possible explanation. The silent UFOs are most often seen after dark and at altitudes apparently inconsistent with possible test flights or refueling operations. Gordon first broke the news to wire services after local law enforcement officers reported UFOs on October 2nd, seen in the northern section of the county over Interstate 77. Less than a week later, the sheriff's department reported that a family visiting them from Ohio, who were not aware of any UFO sightings before him, had been followed by a round object, says Gordon. It came at them at a low altitude while they were on a secondary 2-lane road. Reports of similar objects, dome-shaped craft outfitted with bright lights and often followed by smaller red-lighted objects, poured into Gordon at WYVE. As interest in the sightings mounted, he decided to host a call-in program where people could anonymously report what they had seen in the area. And I quote, "I had about 25 calls in that first hour," end quote. He says, military maneuvers in the Wythe County area are not uncommon. Gordon, who's had 1 daylight and 4 nocturnal sightings himself, is conducting an ongoing investigation into Wythe County UFOs. With fashion photographer John Stember, a military deception specialist, Andrew Convery, who both offered their assistance. As news of the flap went national, Gordon made several visits to local sighting vicinities, They observed a larger UFO, about 900 feet long, bigger than 747 feet long, linking it with a smaller craft in what appeared to be a docking maneuver. Several photographs and poor quality videotapes were taken. Officials at the Tennessee Air National Guard, who spoke with Gordon shortly after some of the first sightings, suggested that the UFOs were conventional aircraft conducting refueling operations. The Pentagon denies that, Gordon says. People locally are mad. They're like me. They've seen something and they know it wasn't refueling. On October 23rd, Gordon and his colleagues held a press conference at WYVE Studios in Witherville. The panel declared their belief that some sort of crash took place in the area, but declined to elaborate. A reporter recently questioned Gordon on the UFOs feasibly being extraterrestrial. Because I'm a reporter, I have to deal in facts and logic, Gordon responded. There's no proof that the UFOs come from anywhere but the United States. If so, they're doing a very good job of sneaking in and out of our country. And if it's a stealth experiment, it's a round one. That was definitely a lot. That was a very solid, big article. And again, there's looks like a couple photos here. I guess this individual, Danny Gordon, has a UFO drawing he's showing. But yeah, it's just absolutely incredible and fascinating. And again, we have this instant labeling of, hey, the government has no information on UFOs of any kind here. But clearly that's not the case, because if you go back a year or two now, that's been debunked. Not to be I'm not trying to be snobby about that, but I'm just pointing it out like, hey, this is a thing, and the government has clearly lied about this. So what else is there to be lying about in regards to this whole realm of conspiracies and unknown? But moving on, UFO reported by 14 at Chalk River. Chalk River, at least 14 residents of the Chalk River area reported having seen unidentified flying objects between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Thursday. Some describe the experience as frightening. Ms. Mary McCarthy, retired Canadian Pacific Railway telegraph operator, said her 7-year-old niece, Frances Elliott, almost fainted and had difficulty settling down for the night. We were arguing about flying saucers just when I looked out the window and saw one, said 16-year-old Leo Elliott, whose family lives at William McCarthy Farm. I just said I did not believe this stuff about the police seeing them, and the McCarthy family said the TV set did not work during the 30 minutes the UFO stayed over and on their farm. It had been reported that Ontario Provincial Police at Cuillin and Barry's Bay sighted UFOs before daylight Thursday. Mr. Elliott described the largest light as yellowish, about 8 feet in diameter from his point of view. It was surrounded by smaller, bright red lights which were continually on the move. The yellow object moved at intervals. We watched for half an hour before the yellow one sank behind the trees, he said. It came back, and then they all faded away to the south. Someone at the farm had telephoned the news to Miss Maureen McCarthy in Chalk River, 5 miles further east. She gave the journal a similar description of the UFOs, which she watched for several minutes before returning to the house to telephone friends. When I went outside again, all the lights were gone, she said. The red lights looked as big as basketballs, but the yellow one was much bigger. A neighbor, Walter Smith, corroborated her story. Inquiries made at the Canadian Forces Base, Foymont, elicited no constructive explanation. The journal wants to know if we want to hand out anything about the UFOs, the telephone operator told his superior. The senior officer said he was not at liberty to comment. Earlier, it was reported that Foymont officials had said the UFOs reported by police Thursday morning had not appeared on the Foymont radar screen. It often seems, and this is me, that's end quote there, but it often seems there's maybe a miscommunication at times, or it just seems like some group doesn't want to reproduce or announce this information. I just get that sometimes reading this, that these stories start off with one sighting, they corroborate with other sightings, and then sometimes they can kind of conclude with maybe something, again, being mysteriously unexplained, not adding up, or just some organization or group that's just not really giving it their all to kind of shed full light on the situation. But that's my perspective on how I interpret this. So without further ado, I'm going to jump to a quick ad break and then we'll be right back. And we're back. So let's continue on. What do we got here? Flying saucer clearly seen over Gas City Sunday evening. Those who were watching for the Arend-Roland comet on Sunday evening saw it in the northern sky. But a few may also have noted an even more curious phenomenon, which outranks the comet. It is reliably reported and well authenticated that a large flying saucer passed over Medicine Hat that evening at 9:35 p.m. It was clearly visible for 8 to 9 seconds and was recorded by 2 senior citizens of the community who were using binoculars at the time to watch the comet. The flying saucer is logged as follows. Traveling south to north at a very high altitude and speed, it turned northwest and then disappeared from vision. An aura of light, heliotrope to gold in hue, covered the flying saucer, and 3 visible reflections, as though in line on a bar, were quite visible. It was apparent this light was coming from within the craft, with a reflective hue enveloping the saucer. There was no sound, the movement of the craft being quite silent, whereas a jet roar might have been expected. It was in full view for 8 to 9 seconds. The couple who report this incident are anxious to know if any other Hat citizens observed the phenomenon on Sunday evening. In Medicine Hat, that is definitely a prominent town in Canada, I believe. But I just find that fascinating because this one is a little bit more closer to home. And I just wanted to throw it in there because the details were very, very on point for this report. And I find it fascinating because that first report I started off with, you don't really hear much about an exhaust coming out as you did in that first report. And this one, it doesn't seem like there necessarily is. It's just emanating these hues that are enveloping the saucer and the craft. But usually you don't see much discussion on a clear exhaust coming from these things. They're silent and they just seem to defy gravity in the way they maneuver. And again, I feel like that's reciprocated in this news article. So moving on from there, I have another one here from 2001. UFO on NASA camera. Washington. The object is certainly unidentified and appears to be flying. Whether this enlarged image really shows a UFO piloted by aliens remains to be seen, but according to the people who released it, this photo and hundreds like it are the best evidence yet of the existence of spacecraft from other worlds. UFO investigators say the image was captured by the Solar and Heliospheric Observation SOHO, a NASA satellite that was launched in 1996 to observe the sun. Since then, it is said SOHO has captured hundreds of images of UFOs moving along a kind of alien superhighway. SOHO is more than 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, with its camera trained towards the sun. Experts say the photographed objects are likely to be only hundreds of kilometers from its lenses. Graham Birdsall, editor of UFO magazine, said the images are irrefutable in that they are from NASA satellites owned by NASA. They resemble the kind of spacecraft we used to see in sci-fi films like Star Trek. Again, they have an image attached here, which is very fascinating. It's just shows this outline of this saucer, but we do have a lot more satellites in the sky, and I think that's definitely one of our best ways of seeing what's really going on. We do have pilots for the Air Force flying around, and they have exceptional targeting systems that can sometimes lock on, like me and Ruben have discussed prior. But when you get out into space and you can start seeing these things, there's a lot going on around our sun, around our moon, and even with other planets in our solar system. But it's definitely worth noting, this is something, again, it could be totally far-fetched and completely unrelated and irrelevant. But this is something I discussed on a previous episode. There are these small little wormholes that open up between Earth and the sun, and they're random and they just appear, and then particles shoot back and forth. And this is how the Earth can sometimes get amazing auroras in the sky and stuff like that. But it's not to be dismissed. Again, these are small little time wormholes that form. Now, when we talk about how perhaps these aliens and these UFOs are moving along a superhighway of sorts around the sun, wouldn't that be cool if we're dealing with a spacecraft or the technology that is able to target one of these wormholes opening up, or create one of these wormholes to open up, and then use them to traverse back and forth, back and forth? Because again, 1.5 million kilometers, that's a heck of a distance. And that, again, even farther now, So just something that I've just kind of played with in the back of my mind a little bit. But moving on from there, radar spots flying saucers in backyard of nation's capital, Washington. The Air Force today investigated reports that several flying saucers have been spotted by radar virtually in its own backyard on the outskirts of the nation's capital. Not only were unidentified objects seen on radar, indicating actual substance instead of mere light, but 2 airline pilots and a newsman saw eerie lights fitting the general description of flying saucers the same night. Officials could not immediately agree on whether this was the first time radar has picked up on flying saucers. Some said it was. All agreed it was unusual. The objects also were different from the average reported saucer in that they traveled at a relatively slow speed, as well as later disclosing the customary burst that far outspeeds normal airplanes. One thing was certain: a thorough investigation is being made by the Air Technical Intelligence Center, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, O, which has been set up to look into flying saucer reports. Such reports, officials had said earlier yesterday, are coming in faster than at any time since the initial flood in 1947. The current average is about 100 sightings a month. The flying saucers over the Capitol were reported late yesterday, about 36 hours after the incident actually occurred. This is the story as pieced together from Air Force reports, persons involved, and other sources. An operator at the Air Traffic Controller Center at Washington National Airport across the Potomac from the Capitol spotted 8 unidentified images on one of his radars. The area surveillance scope, with a range of possibly 70 miles, these images were slow-moving, going probably 100 to 130 miles an hour, and they were flying in the vicinity of nearby Andrews Air Force Base. The control center, operated by the Civil Aeronautics Administration, notified the Air Force and also asked planes in the area if they could see anything. That was around midnight. Captain Casey Pierman of Detroit, piloting aircraft Capital Airlines Flight 807 southbound from National Airport, soon reported seeing 7 objects between Washington and Martinsburg. He said they changed pace, sometimes moving at tremendous speed and other times hanging almost motionless. He was careful in his reports, and later in an interview, not to identify the objects as flying saucers. He described them as like falling stars without tails, but added, "In my years of flying, I've seen a lot of falling or shooting stars, but these were much faster. They couldn't have been aircraft. They were moving too fast for that. They were about the same size as the brighter stars, and were much higher than our 6,000-foot altitude." Another airliner, Capital National Airlines Flight 610, also reported seeing a light following it from Herndon to within 4 miles of Washington. Saul Pett, an Associated Press newsman, said to have seen a flying saucer that same night near his home at River Edge, east side of New York. So again, I just personally love the cooperating stories just with all these focused areas that have people talking about seeing similar things in the same general targeted area. But moving on, I think I got 2 more here for you, and then I think we'll wrap up this episode. There's a lot of newspaper articles about UFOs. This is definitely going to have a part 2 at some point because it's no shortage. This is the Sunday Post, October 15th, 1967. Flying saucers. Canada's scientists are worried. The Canadian Air Force has stepped up a probe into flying saucers following fresh reports that mysterious objects with flashing lights are terrorizing the Calgary district. In the latest incident, a woman claimed a dazzling light stabbed out of the night sky as she drove home on Wednesday. Her car's engine and electrical system cut out completely while a dark oval shape silently circled 4 of 5 times over her at a height of about 1,000 feet. When the object finally disappeared, the car's power returned. Helicopters may be used to hunt an unidentified object. 3 gold prospectors claimed they saw fall from a flying saucer in July. Squadron leader E.B. Chase of Calgary said the latest reports have the ring of authenticity. Again, a whole archive of just people seeing these things. And again, that one dates back to the 60s, which seems to be a very prominent time in our history of when UFO sightings were just going popping off like no tomorrow. It's truly astounding. Here we go. We have another one from Washington. Flying saucer seen over Washington for the second time in 4 days. Washington, D.C. saw flying saucers again for 6 hours early today. 8 to 12 objects showed on radar screens flying a 10-mile arc around the Capitol. Radar men estimated the objects, or flying saucers, were clipping along at about 120 miles per hour. The last time the saucers were spotted over Washington, on Saturday, the Air Force sent jet fighters up to chase them, and when the word of the new appearance was flashed around, it was expected that the jets would be ordered up again to try to shoot down the objects. But the jets stayed on the ground. An air defense official explained, "We were too busy with other things, and besides, objects aren't hurting anybody." However, civil aeronautics officials did direct an Eastern Airlines pilot to check the objects as he flew over the city, but the pilot didn't see a thing. The official said the saucers disappeared from the radar screen when the plane reached the area where they'd been tracked. So, it remains a mystery. The second appearance of the saucers in 4 days leaves the experts just as stumped as ever. And some think the saucers are spaceships from another planet. Some think they're just natural phenomena we haven't figured out yet. The Air Force doesn't know what to think, but it's determined to find out. Top scientists have been called in to launch a major investigation. And again, we're always coming back to, top scientists, a government party has been created to follow it with this. There's all these different simple answers to just kind of calm the public, I would say. Again, this is another time period when things are alarming. There's wars breaking out and people are panicked and people turn to the government for a level of comfort and they want to know there's closure to this and they don't want to be afraid and have to worry about an unknown flying ship going above their property. They just want to, go to work, take care of their families and live a simple life. That's something I just aspire to do, just live a simple life. But at times it's hard to deny it when there are things going on out there, and that's why people tend to turn to the easy answer. I'm not saying this is the easy answer, but it's maybe easy is the wrong term. It's more so a convenient answer to just give peace of mind, and there's nothing wrong with having that peace of mind. If that's the way you want to live your life, by all means. There are other individuals that will fight this fight and look into this information and explore it, and it's not for everyone. I understand that, and I think just these articles at the time period where it was just the government and scientists and these parties just kind of reaching out to that population, just trying to create the calm. You don't want to have people rising and uproaring in a panic. That won't do anything. But I do find it interesting how this article talks about how these jet fighters stay grounded this time around, as if what did they learn that they didn't share the first time upon seeing these things? Just something to think about. But that's all the time we got for this episode of Campfire Clues. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll definitely be coming back more with some additional newspaper articles about UFOs, so definitely stay tuned. But until next time, you can find us at CryptidClues.ca, and you can also find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and get ad-free early episodes on our Patreon. Additionally, if you want to say hi or just send us a message, you can send us an email, CryptidClues@gmail.com. But without further ado, we'll see you guys soon. Stay safe.